Hi, this is Jeff Blauette, technical agronomist with Cooperative Farmers Elevator. And on this week's Field Friday segment, we're out in the beans and starting to see something that's really showing up in some areas that we saw the last few years, but I wanted to touch on it again. This is soybean gall midge larvae damage. What you'll see as you go out in these field edges, I've got some pictures of some damage that you'll see as you're riding along the edges, or you might even see it along the roads. You've got plants that are various levels of damaged, anywhere from dead to some that are just wilting. This is probably going to continue. You're going to see more plants kind of wilting and going backwards or dying. Again, hopefully it's just on the outer edges, but this pest kind of continues to expand its footprint. It's kind of started out along the Iowa, South Dakota, Nebraska, Minnesota border, all the border areas there. It's expanded to the east and to the west now. You basically have got the eastern half of Nebraska, the eastern part of South Dakota, the western part of Minnesota, the western part of Iowa. Basically the western half of Iowa has been showing up with identified gall midge larvae damage. So with these dead, dying, and wilting plants, obviously there's nothing you can do. You can see some of the larvae themselves, what they look like once they get into the plant. They kind of are an orange, kind of a really small larvae, but there's lots of them typically. You can see, I mean, it's not uncommon to see 10 to 20 of them in a plant, and various levels below that. But the unfortunate part is there's really nothing we can do about them for sure now. The damage is done. They're already in the plants. They're underneath a layer of the skin, chewing away at that plant. That's why it's kind of either withering up or dying or dead already. You can't get any insecticide to them in that manner. The unfortunate part is there really isn't any timing of an insecticide that we think works yet. Nothing that's been researched has been really proven to be effective. There's been some anecdotal things of trying some stuff earlier on, but those bean plants get infected when they're really small, probably after they get the first couple trifoliates, maybe like really early spring timing. What you'll see is as that plant really starts to grow about that time, you'll see the bottom inch or so of that stem is it's almost like it grows too fast for its outer skin, and it cracks that skin. Those fissures, they call it, or these cracks in that skin layer, is where that fly that emerges from where it nested last year, it flies in and kind of basically deposits eggs in those cracks. And when they hatch, then the larvae start feeding, and that's why we see the damage and some of that now. Generally, it's worse in the edges. We have seen some fields. You can find some damage out in the middle. It's typically not as bad, but you can find them. They're a really small fly when they basically emerge, so they can blow with the wind. So they typically will be across the crop line. If you've got a corn soybean line, they were probably in the beans last year. If you're seeing them now, they were probably across the crop line where the beans were last year. That's corn this year most likely. They hatch there, they get up and they fly to the nearest soybean edges, and they'll keep going until they find some. And like I say, if they're closest to where they hatch, there'll be more of them successfully lay eggs and causing damage. Nebraska, Iowa State, Minnesota, and South Dakota State have spent some, plot resources and efforts trying to figure out what can we do with treatment-wise with them. Really haven't found anything effective. The only thing that I've heard that has been somewhat effective, and it's difficult to do, but cultivation. Basically that bottom inch of that stem that's got cracks, and if we can kind of gently throw some soil over that, cover that, that's shown some effectiveness. It's really difficult to do, especially on those smaller beans, and then you got to have a cultivator to begin with, which doesn't include everybody obviously. But that's something they have shown as some effectiveness. It's obviously impossible in a no-till field, and there's a lot of no-till beans around, so that becomes not an option. Applying insecticides, you'd have to figure out the timing of when those flies emerge, and they haven't really figured out how to trigger that yet, and then they emerge for a while. About the only thing that we've seen is effective is trying to eliminate as many crop lines as you can, which, yeah, that sounds easy and it's not, but extra crop lines are always worse. Those outside couple rows really get hit hardest. So, but otherwise, there isn't really an answer yet. I'd like to be able to sell you something to take care of them, but we don't have that today. And I don't know if we're going to get there. There is some slight differences in genetics. We don't know the answers to that yet. There's obviously no ratings, but they've seen that in their research that something that maybe doesn't crack the stems as much might have an advantage. That doesn't mean that it's the genetics that fits for our area with disease tolerance, yield potential, iron chlorosis tolerance, and so forth, but all those things are kind of being researched. But just wanted to bring you up to speed a little bit. We talked about it last year. I'm going to talk about it again. I still don't have an answer, unfortunately, but it is something that you're going to be able to see as you drive around these fields today. So with that, that's this week's Field Friday segment, and we'll see you next week.